The scorching Arizona sun beat down on Olivia Everly's pale face as she slumped against the side of the dusty stagecoach, her breath coming in ragged gasps. It was 1878, and the promise of a new life in Silverwater Creek was fading with each painful mile. "Miss, are you all right?" The driver's concerned voice barely registered as Olivia's vision swam, the landscape around her blurring into a haze of brown and gold. "I'm fine," she whispered, though she was anything but. The consumption that had plagued her for months had worsened during the journey west. That, coupled with the shame of fleeing Boston after her father's financial scandal and subsequent suicide, had hollowed her out completely. The stagecoach hit a particularly deep rut, and Olivia bit back a cry of pain. The elderly woman sitting across from her tutted sympathetically. "Not much further, dear. Silverwater Creek's just beyond that ridge." Olivia nodded weakly, clutching her handkerchief tighter as another coughing fit threatened. The cloth was already stained with flecks of blood, a sight she carefully hid from her fellow passengers. Her Aunt Martha was expecting a healthy niece capable of helping with her boarding house, not a burden weakened by illness. As the coach crested the final hill, Olivia caught her first glimpse of Silverwater Creek, a collection of wooden buildings nestled in a valley, with mountains rising majestically in the distance. It was beautiful in its rugged simplicity, so different from Boston's refined streets. The stagecoach rolled to a stop outside the town's only hotel, and passengers began to disembark. Olivia gathered her meager belongings, but when she tried to stand, her legs buckled beneath her. "Whoa there!" A strong arm caught her before she hit the ground. Olivia looked up into the most striking blue eyes she'd ever seen, set in a sun-bronzed face beneath a well-worn Stetson. "Thank you," she managed, mortified by her weakness. "You're burning up with fever, madam," the stranger said, his voice deep and tinged with concern. "Doc Peterson's office is just down the street. Let me help you there." "No, please," Olivia protested weakly. "My aunt is expecting me, Martha Evans, at the Silverwater boarding house." The man's expression softened. "Martha's place is on the other side of town." "You're in no condition to walk that far." He hesitated, then said, "I'm Xavier Galloway. Most folks call me Zav. I work at the R Ranch outside town." "Olivia Everly," she replied, another coughing fit cutting off further words. Without hesitation, Zav swept her into his arms as if she weighed nothing, ignoring the scandalized gasps of onlookers. "My valise," Olivia protested. "I'll send someone for your things," he assured her, striding toward a hitching post where a magnificent chestnut stallion waited. "Right now, we need to get you to Doc Peterson." Olivia wanted to protest further, but she lacked the strength. The fever that had been building for days now raged through her body, and she found herself resting her cheek against the rough fabric of Zav's shirt, inhaling the scent of leather, horses, and open sky. "I'm sorry," she whispered, ashamed of her weakness of being a burden to this stranger. Zav looked down at her, his expression gentle despite his rugged features. "Nothing to be sorry for, Miss Everly. Everyone needs help sometimes." As he lifted her onto his horse and mounted behind her, Olivia's consciousness began to fade. The last thing she remembered was the secure feeling of strong arms around her waist and a voice murmuring, "I've got you. You're safe now." The next few days passed in a blur of fever dreams for Olivia. Occasionally, she would surface to consciousness to find herself in a clean, sparse room with sunlight streaming through lace curtains. Sometimes Martha Evans was there, her aunt's weathered face creased with worry. Other times, it was the kindly doctor. Peterson, forcing bitter-tasting medicines down her throat. And sometimes, when the night was at its darkest and her fever at its highest, she thought she saw Xavier Galloway sitting by her bedside, his hat in his hands and concern etched across his handsome features. On the fourth day, Olivia woke with a clear head for the first time since arriving in Silverwater Creek. The room came into sharp focus, a simple bedroom in what she assumed was her aunt's boarding house, with floral wallpaper and a patchwork quilt covering her. Well, look who's finally decided to join the land of the living, came a warm, familiar voice. Aunt Martha sat in a rocking chair by the window, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun that did nothing to diminish the kindness in her eyes. How long? Olivia asked, her voice raspy from disuse. 4 days, Martha replied, setting aside her knitting and moving to pour a glass of water from the pitcher on the nightstand. You gave us quite a scare, young lady. Olivia accepted the water gratefully, the cool liquid soothing her parched throat. I'm sorry to be such a burden, Martha snorted. Nonsense, your family. Besides, you're hardly the first person to arrive in town half dead. She patted Olivia's hand. Dr. Peterson says you've turned the corner, but you need rest and good food to build your strength. The consumption's been hard on you, shame washed over Olivia. I should have told you in my letters, about my illness, about Father's, about Edward's debts and his taking the coward's way out, Martha finished bluntly. I read the Boston papers, dear. I knew what you were running from. Tears sprang to Olivia's eyes. Her father's financial ruin had destroyed not only their family fortune but their social standing. When he'd chosen to end his life rather than face the consequences, the scandal had been unbearable. Olivia had been abandoned by her so-called friends and even her fiancé, Richard, who'd broken their engagement with barely concealed relief. You don't despise me, Olivia whispered. Martha's face softened. For what? Being the daughter of a foolish man, for being ill? Nonsense. She stood, smoothing her apron. Now, there's someone who's been checking on you every day, even though I've told him 100 times I'd send word when you woke. Olivia's heart gave a strange flutter. Xavier Galloway, Martha's eyebrows rose. So you do remember him. Yes, that cowboy's been more persistent than a fly at a picnic, nearly wore a path in my floor these past days. He saved me, Olivia said softly. I'd like to thank him properly. Well, you'll get your chance. He usually stops by after his work at the ranch. Martha moved toward the door. I'll bring you some broth. You need to get your strength back. Left alone, Olivia took stock of her situation. She'd come west with little more than the clothes on her back and a desperate hope for a new beginning. Now she was bedridden, dependent on her aunt's charity. The shame of it burned almost as hot as her fever had. She was dozing when a soft knock at the door roused her. Expecting her aunt, Olivia called, "Come in." Instead, Xavier Galloway's tall frame filled the doorway, his hat in his hands and uncertainty on his face. Miss Everly, he said, his deep voice sending an unexpected shiver down her spine. Your aunt said you were awake. I hope I'm not disturbing you. Olivia pushed herself to a sitting position, acutely aware of her disheveled appearance. Not at all, Mr. Galloway. Please come in. He stepped inside, looking strangely out of place in the feminine room. In the clear light of day, Olivia could see him properly for the first time. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his skin tanned from endless days under the sun. His dark hair curled slightly where it met his collar, and those blue eyes were even more striking than she remembered. How are you feeling? He asked, remaining standing despite the chair nearby. Better, thank you, she replied. And I owe that to you. You saved my life, Mr. Galloway. A flush crept up his neck. Any decent person would have done the same, madam. Perhaps, but it was you who did. I'm grateful. Olivia hesitated, then added, My aunt says you've visited every day. The flush deepened. Just wanted to make sure you were recovering. An awkward silence fell between them. Olivia was suddenly conscious of the vast differences in their worlds. Before her father's disgrace, she would never have associated with someone like Xavier Galloway, a working cowboy with calloused hands and clothes that bore the dust of honest labor. Yet now, fallen from grace and weakened by illness, she found herself drawn to his straightforward manner and quiet strength. Well, Xav said finally, settling his hat back on his head, I should let you rest. Just wanted to see for myself that you were on the mend. Wait, Olivia said impulsively. Could you tell me about Silverwater Creek, about your ranch? I've come all this way and I know nothing about my new home. Something like pleasure flickered across his face. He pulled the chair closer to her bedside and sat, his large frame making the delicate furniture seem absurdly small. "Well, Miss Everly, Silverwater Creek got its name from the stream that runs just south of town. When the sun hits it just right, the water looks like liquid silver." For the next hour, Xav painted a picture of Silverwater Creek and the surrounding territory with words as vivid as any artist's brush. He told her about the Triple R Ranch where he worked as foreman, about the wild beauty of the desert in bloom after a rare rain, about the community that had formed in this remote corner of the Arizona territory. Olivia hung on every word, her imagination carrying her beyond the confines of her sickroom to the wide open spaces he described. "And what brought you to Silverwater Creek, Mr. Galloway?" she asked when he paused. A shadow crossed his face. "War," he said simply. "After Appomattox, I couldn't go back to Virginia. Too many ghosts. Headed west instead, worked my way across the country until I landed here 8 years ago." Olivia did the calculation quickly. "You were very young to have fought. 17 when I enlisted, 20 when it ended." His eyes held memories no man should carry. But that's ancient history now. Before Olivia could respond, Martha appeared in the doorway with a tray of soup and bread. "That's enough visiting for today, Xav," she said firmly. "My niece needs to eat and rest." Xav rose immediately. "Of course, Mrs. Evans." He tipped his hat to Olivia. "Miss Everly, I'm glad to see you improving." "Thank you for the visit, Mr. Galloway," Olivia replied, surprised by how reluctant she was to see him go. As he left, Martha set the tray across Olivia's lap. "That man," she said, shaking her head, "has been sweet on you since he carried you into town, though heaven knows why, given you were half dead and completely unconscious." Olivia nearly choked on her first spoonful of broth. "Don't be ridiculous, Aunt Martha. Mr. Galloway was simply being kind." Martha's knowing look made Olivia flush. "Xav Galloway doesn't make social calls, dear. He's been a solitary soul since he came to these parts. If he's sitting by your bedside telling stories, it means something." "It means nothing," Olivia insisted, though a small, traitorous part of her hoped otherwise. "Besides, once I'm well, I intend to earn my keep. You mentioned in your letters that you needed help with the boarding house. And you'll give it when you're stronger," Martha agreed. "But don't be in such a rush to push away a good man's interest. They're rare enough in these parts." Over the next 2 weeks, as Olivia gradually regained her strength, Xav continued his daily visits. Sometimes he brought small gifts, a book of poetry he'd borrowed from the schoolteacher, a perfect eagle feather he'd found on the range, or wild berries he'd picked on his way to town. They settled into a routine, with Xav arriving after his day's work was done, sometimes still dusty from the trail. He would sit by her bedside and tell her about his day, or listen as she read aloud from the poetry book, or simply sit in companionable silence. As Olivia grew stronger, she began helping with small tasks around the boarding house, folding laundry, polishing silver, or preparing simple meals under Martha's watchful eye. The first time Xav found her in the kitchen instead of her bedroom, the smile that lit his face made her heart skip a beat. "You're looking better every day," he said, accepting the cup of coffee she offered him. "I feel better," Olivia admitted. "Dr. Peterson says the dry air here is good for my lungs, and Aunt Martha's cooking has put some meat back on my bones." "Speaking of which," Martha interjected from where she was kneading bread dough, "the town's having its Founders' Day celebration this Saturday. There'll be a picnic and dancing in the evening. Might do you good to get out, meet some of the folks." Xav's fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around his coffee cup. "That's a fine idea, Mrs. Evans," he said carefully. Then, clearing his throat, he turned to Olivia. "If you're feeling up to it, Miss Everly, I'd be honored to escort you." The formal phrasing couldn't hide the hopeful note in his voice. Olivia felt a blush creep up her cheeks. "I'd like that very much, Mr. Galloway," she replied, ignoring her aunt's satisfied smile. "It's settled then," Xav said, his relief evident. "I'll come by around noon on Saturday." That night, as Olivia brushed her hair before bed, she studied her reflection in the small mirror above her dresser. The gaunt, sickly woman who had arrived in Silverwater Creek was gradually disappearing. Her cheeks had more color, and her eyes no longer looked too large for her face. She was still thin, but no longer skeletal. Yet she was not the polished Boston socialite she had once been, either. That woman had died along with her father and the life they had known. Looking at herself now, Olivia wondered who she was becoming in this dusty frontier town. And she wondered, with a mixture of hope and trepidation, what Xavier Galloway saw when he looked at her. Saturday dawned clear and beautiful. Olivia spent more time than she cared to admit selecting her dress a simple pale blue cotton that was one of the few she'd brought from Boston. It was plain by Eastern standards but felt right for a country celebration. At precisely noon, Xav arrived at the boarding house. Olivia nearly didn't recognize him at first. Gone were the dusty work clothes and sweat-stained hat. Instead, he wore clean dark trousers, a crisp white shirt, and a vest that emphasized his broad shoulders. His unruly hair was neatly combed, and he'd clearly visited the barber for a fresh shave. "Miss Everly," he said, his eyes widening as she descended the stairs. "You look lovely." "Thank you, Mr. Galloway," she replied, suddenly shy. "You look quite handsome yourself." He offered his arm and she took it, feeling the solid strength beneath the fabric of his shirt. As they walked toward the town square where the celebration was being held, Olivia was acutely aware of the curious glances they received. "I'm afraid I'm causing quite a stir," she murmured. Xav chuckled. "Small towns run on gossip, Miss Everly. They've been speculating about you since you arrived, and they're not used to seeing me with a beautiful woman on my arm." The compliment warmed her, but also reminded her of their different situations. "I imagine your work doesn't leave much time for socializing." "That's true enough," he admitted. "Ranching is dawn to dusk and then some, but it's a good life." They reached the town square, which had been transformed with bunting and tables laden with food. A band was setting up on a small platform, and children ran about playing games while their parents socialized. "Xav, over here." A jovial man waved them over to a group standing near the lemonade stand. "That's Frank Miller, the blacksmith," Xav explained as he guided her through the crowd. "And his wife, Betsy. Good people." The next hour was a whirlwind of introductions as Olivia met what seemed like the entire population of Silverwater Creek. Everyone was curious about Xav's lady friend from back east, as they called her, but most were welcoming and kind. Xav stayed by her side, his steady presence a comfort as she navigated the unfamiliar social waters. When she tired, he found her a seat in the shade. When she mentioned thirst, he brought her lemonade. His attentiveness touched her deeply. As the afternoon progressed, the band struck up a lively tune, and couples began to dance in the cleared area at the center of the square. "Would you care to dance, Miss Everly?" Xav asked, extending his hand. Olivia hesitated. "I'm not sure I have the strength for anything too vigorous." "They're about to play a waltz," he assured her. "I promise to hold you up if you falter." The earnestness in his eyes decided her. She placed her hand in his and allowed him to lead her to the dancing area. The music slowed, and Xav placed one hand at her waist, holding her other hand gently in his. As they began to move to the music, Olivia was surprised by his grace. "You dance very well, Mr. Galloway," she said, looking up at him. A smile touched his lips. "My mother insisted all her sons learn. Said no woman wants a man who can't move on a dance floor. Your mother was a wise woman." "She was," he agreed, a hint of sadness in his voice. "She passed during the war while I was away fighting." "I'm sorry," Olivia said softly. They danced in silence for a moment, then Xav said, "I've been meaning to ask what brought you to Silverwater Creek. It's a long way from Boston." Olivia tensed, but she owed him honesty. "Necessity," she admitted. "After my father died, there was nothing left for me in Boston. No money, no prospects, only whispers and pity." She swallowed hard. "My fiancé broke our engagement when my father's financial ruin became public." Xav's hand tightened slightly at her waist. "Then he was a fool," he said firmly. He didn't want a penniless wife, Olivia said, the old hurt still stinging. Especially not one who shortly afterward developed consumption. Xav guided her through a turn, his eyes never leaving hers. His loss is Silverwater Creek's gain, he said simply. The music ended and Xav reluctantly released her. Olivia realized she was breathless, though whether from the exertion or his proximity she couldn't say. Perhaps we should sit the next one out, he suggested, noticing her flushed cheeks. They found a quiet spot at the edge of the celebration, and Xav brought her a plate of food from the communal tables. As they ate, Olivia felt a contentment she hadn't experienced in a very long time. "Tell me about the Triple R," she said. "You mentioned you're the foreman," Xav nodded. "Have been for 3 years now. The owner, Mr. Rutherford, is getting on in years. He stays in San Francisco most of the time, leaving the day-to-day operations to me. That's a lot of responsibility." "It is," he agreed, "but I love the work, challenging as it can be. We've got 15,000 acres, 300 head of cattle, and a dozen good men working the range." "It sounds wonderful," Olivia said, trying to imagine such a vast expanse of land. "It's not an easy life," Xav cautioned. "Drought, rustlers, predators, there's always something threatening the herd, and the work is backbreaking." "Yet you love it," Olivia observed, a slow smile spread across his face. "I do. There's nothing like watching the sun rise over the mountains, or bringing a calf into the world, or riding across land that stretches further than the eye can see." He looked at her curiously. "What about you? What did you love in Boston?" Olivia considered the question. "Books," she said finally. "Music, art, the life of the mind," she sighed. "I taught piano to young ladies before I became ill. Do you miss it?" he asked. "Teaching?" "Yes, Boston." She shook her head. "No, not anymore. It ceased to be home when everyone I thought cared for me turned their backs." The honesty between them felt both frightening and liberating. They were from such different worlds, yet here in this dusty frontier town, those differences seemed to matter less than the connection growing between them. As the sun began to set, lanterns were lit around the square, casting a warm glow over the continuing celebration. Olivia stifled a yawn, and Xav immediately noticed. "You're tired," he said. "I should get you back to your aunt's." "I'm fine," Olivia protested, reluctant for the day to end. "You're still recovering," he reminded her gently. "There'll be other celebrations." He offered her his arm again, and they made their way back through town toward the boarding house. The night was cool, with a blanket of stars spread across the vast sky above them. "I've never seen so many stars," Olivia marveled, tilting her head back to take in the sight. "One of the benefits of being far from city lights," Xav replied. "I've spent many a night on the range with just those stars for company." They reached the boarding house too soon for Olivia's liking. On the porch, she turned to face him, suddenly shy again. "Thank you for today, Mr. Galloway. I can't remember when I've enjoyed myself more." "The pleasure was mine, Miss Everly." He hesitated, then said, "I was wondering if you might call me Xav, Mr. Galloway makes me feel like I should be looking over my shoulder for my father." Olivia smiled. "Only if you'll call me Olivia." "Olivia," he repeated, as if testing how the name felt on his tongue. "It suits you." He took her hand in his touch gentle despite the calluses that spoke of hard work. "I'd like to call on you again if I may." "I'd like that very much, Xav," she replied, her heart quickening at the warmth in his eyes. For a moment she thought he might kiss her. Instead, he lifted her hand to his lips, the gesture both courtly and achingly intimate. "Good night, Olivia," he said softly. "Good night, Xav," she whispered, reluctantly withdrawing her hand and entering the boarding house. Inside, she leaned against the closed door, her emotions in a whirl. She was falling for a cowboy, a man so different from anyone she had ever expected to care for. Yet there was something about Xavier Galloway that called to her, that made her feel safe and valued in a way she had never experienced before. She was still smiling when she entered the kitchen to find Martha waiting up for her. "I take it you had a good time," her aunt said, pouring her a cup of tea. "Wonderful," Olivia admitted, sinking into a chair at the table. Martha studied her face. Xav's a good man, Olivia, one of the best. But loving a rancher isn't easy. It's a hard life, especially for a woman raised with the comforts you're used to. I'm not used to those comforts anymore, Olivia reminded her, and besides, you're getting ahead of things. We've only just begun to know each other. Martha smiled knowingly. I've seen the way he looks at you and the way you look at him. Just be sure you know what you're getting into. As the summer progressed, Olivia's health continued to improve. The dry Arizona air seemed to heal her lungs, and Dr. Peterson declared her cough much diminished. She still tired easily, but she was able to take on more responsibilities at the boarding house, grateful to repay her aunt's kindness. True to his word, Xav called on her regularly. On Sundays, his one day off from the ranch, he would take her on outings, picnics by the creek, rides in his wagon to see the countryside, or simply walks through town. Sometimes they would sit on the boarding house porch, talking until the stars came out. Olivia found herself drawn deeper into the life of Silverwater Creek. She began helping at the small town library, organizing the modest collection of books and reading to the children on Saturday mornings. She made friends among the townspeople, particularly Betsy Miller, the blacksmith's wife, and Sarah Peterson, the doctor's daughter. One Sunday in late August, Xav arrived at the boarding house with a picnic basket and a proposition. "I'd like to show you the Triple R today," he said, a hint of nervousness in his voice, "if you're feeling strong enough for the ride." Olivia's heart leapt at the suggestion. She had heard so much about the ranch but had never seen it. "I'd love that," she said eagerly. They set out in Xav's wagon, heading north from town along a dusty trail. As they left Silverwater Creek behind, the landscape opened up around them, vast expanses of scrubland dotted with mesquite and prickly pear, with the distant mountains forming a jagged blue line on the horizon. "It's beautiful," Olivia breathed, taking in the wild splendor of the land. "It grows on you," Xav agreed, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he smiled. "When I first came west, I thought it was the most desolate place I'd ever seen. Now I can't imagine being anywhere else." After about an hour's journey, they crested a rise and Xav pulled the wagon to a halt. "There it is," he said with undisguised pride. "The Triple R." Below them, a valley spread out, greener than the surrounding landscape thanks to a stream that wound through it. A cluster of buildings formed the ranch headquarters, a large main house, a bunkhouse, barns, and corrals. In the distance, cattle grazed on the rolling grasslands. "It's larger than I imagined," Olivia said, impressed by the scope of the operation. 15,000 acres is hard to picture until you see it," Xav replied. "Come on, I'll show you around." As they approached the ranch buildings, a dog came bounding out to greet them, followed by a gray-haired man with a weathered face. "Hank," Xav called in greeting. "This is Miss Olivia Everly from town. Olivia, this is Hank Peterson, our ranch cook and the oldest hand on the Triple R. Pleasure to meet you, miss," Hank said, tipping his hat. "So you're the lady who's got our Xav all tied up in knots." "Hank," Xav warned, but his voice held more amusement than censure. "Just stating facts," the old cowboy replied unrepentantly. "He talks about you so much, the boys threatened to hog-tie him if he mentioned your name one more time." Olivia laughed, delighted by both the information and Xav's obvious embarrassment. "It's lovely to meet you too, Mr. Peterson. Just Hank, miss. Everyone around here just calls me Hank." Xav showed her around the ranch, from the corrals where several cowboys were breaking new horses, to the barn with its sweet smell of hay, to the main house where he lived in a small apartment while the owner's quarters remained mostly unused. "Mr. Rutherford only comes out twice a year to check on things," Xav explained as they walked through the well-appointed but clearly masculine main rooms. "The rest of the time, it's just me and the hands." After the tour, they took their picnic to a spot by the stream where a stand of cottonwood trees provided shade from the afternoon sun. As they ate the fried chicken and biscuits that Martha had packed for them, Olivia felt a sense of peace wash over her. "Do you miss it?" Xav asked suddenly. Your old life, I mean. Olivia considered the question. Sometimes I miss certain things, concerts, libraries, the changing of the seasons, but no, I don't miss my old life. She met his gaze steadily. I was never truly happy there, just going through the motions of what was expected of me. And here, he pressed, are you happy here? Yes, she said simply. Despite everything, my illness, my father's disgrace, starting over with nothing, I'm happier now than I've ever been. The look that crossed Xavier's face then made her breath catch. He reached across the blanket to take her hand, his touch sending warmth through her. Olivia, he began, then seemed to lose his nerve. Whatever he had been about to say was interrupted by the sound of hoofbeats approaching rapidly. A young cowboy rode up, looking apologetic when he saw them. Sorry to interrupt, boss, but we've got trouble at the north pasture. Fence is down and the river's rising with that storm that blew through last night. Cattle are scattered everywhere. Xav was on his feet immediately, his expression shifting from tender to focused in an instant. Round up whoever's at the ranch, I'll be right there. He turned to Olivia, regret in his eyes. I'm sorry, but I have to go, she said, understanding. This is your responsibility, he hesitated, clearly torn. I'll have one of the boys drive you back to town. I'll be fine here, she assured him. Do what you need to do. Still he hesitated, then he bent swiftly and pressed a kiss to her forehead. I'll be back as soon as I can, he promised, then strode quickly toward the ranch buildings. Olivia watched him go, touching the spot where his lips had brushed her skin. It wasn't the declaration she had sensed coming, but in a way, it told her all she needed to know about his feelings. She repacked the picnic basket and walked slowly back to the main house, where Hank was waiting. Xav asked me to look after you until he gets back, the old cowboy explained. Could be a few hours, could be most of the night, depending on how bad the situation is. I understand, Olivia said. Ranch work doesn't keep regular hours. Hank gave her an appraising look. No, it doesn't. That doesn't bother you. Olivia recognized the question for what it was, a test of sorts. Life rarely goes according to plan, Mr. Peterson. I've learned that the hard way. What matters is how we handle the unexpected. The old cowboy nodded, apparently satisfied with her answer. Xav's had his share of the unexpected too, you know. Lost his whole family in the war one way or another. His pa and older brother killed at Gettysburg, his mother to illness while he was fighting, his younger brother to a rebel bullet at Cold Harbor. Olivia's heart ached at the thought of so much loss. He never told me, he wouldn't, Hank said. Not one to dwell on the past, our Xav, but it shaped him, made him wary of letting people get too close. He fixed her with a penetrating gaze. Until you. The simple statement hung in the air between them, its implications both thrilling and terrifying. Before Olivia could respond, a crash of thunder sounded overhead and rain began to pour down. That's going to make their job harder, Hank observed grimly. Come on inside. No sense in you catching a chill. Olivia followed him into the main house, where he built a fire in the stone fireplace and made coffee. As the storm raged outside, they talked, Hank sharing stories of the early days of the Triple R and of a younger Xav, determined to prove himself in a harsh land. Hours passed, and Olivia found herself growing increasingly concerned as darkness fell, and the storm showed no signs of abating. The thought of Xav out in such conditions, trying to rescue scattered cattle, made her heart clench with worry. Should we send someone to check on them? She asked as lightning split the sky outside. Hank shook his head. They'll be fine. Xav knows this land better than anyone, and he wouldn't take unnecessary risks with his men. It was well past midnight when they finally heard horses in the yard. Olivia rushed to the door, Hank close behind her. A group of 6 riders, Xav among them, dismounted wearily from mud-splattered horses. They were soaked to the skin, their faces etched with exhaustion. Got most of them back, Xav reported to Hank as they entered the house. Lost 3 to the river, but it could have been worse. Only then did he seem to register Olivia's presence. You're still here, the storm, she explained. Hank thought it best if I waited. Xav nodded, water dripping from his hat onto the wooden floor. Smart thinking. He looked dead on his feet, swaying slightly from exhaustion. "You need dry clothes and hot food," Olivia said decisively, taking charge despite her surroundings. "All of you do." The next hour was a flurry of activity as Hank prepared a late supper for the returning cowboys while Olivia found towels and helped distribute coffee. Xav disappeared briefly and returned in dry clothes, his hair still damp but his color better. He found her in the kitchen, helping Hank serve up plates of beans and biscuits. "You didn't have to do this," he said quietly. "I wanted to," she replied, meeting his gaze. "This is part of ranch life, isn't it? Dealing with emergencies, helping where needed." Something flickered in his eyes, hope, perhaps, or a deeper emotion she wasn't ready to name. "Yes," he said, "it is." Later, when the cowboys had eaten their fill and retired to the bunkhouse, and Hank had gone to his own quarters, Xav and Olivia found themselves alone by the dying fire. "I'm sorry about our picnic," he said. "Not exactly how I planned the day to go." Olivia smiled. "It was perfect in its own way. I got to see the real Triple R, not just the tour you would have given a visitor." Xav studied her face in the firelight. "You're not just any visitor, Olivia." The way he said her name sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the storm still raging outside. He moved closer on the sofa they shared, his hand finding hers. "What I was trying to say earlier before we were interrupted." He took a deep breath. "I've never met anyone like you. Someone who faces adversity with such grace, who sees beauty in this harsh land, who makes me feel like I've finally found what I've been searching for all these years." Olivia's heart pounded. "Xav, let me finish," he said gently. "I know we come from different worlds. I know you're still recovering your health. I know there are 100 reasons why this might not make sense." His blue eyes were intense in the firelight. "But I'm falling in love with you, Olivia Everly, and I needed you to know that." The words hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable. Olivia felt tears spring to her eyes, not of sadness but of a joy so pure it almost hurt. "I'm falling in love with you too," she whispered, the truth of it resonating deep in her soul. Xav's face transformed with wonder. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, then deepened as Olivia responded, her hand coming up to touch his face. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Xav rested his forehead against hers. "I didn't plan on this happening," he admitted. "When I found you half-conscious at the stagecoach, I just wanted to help. I never expected to find the other half of my heart." "Nor I," Olivia said softly, "but perhaps the best things in life are the ones we don't plan for." The next morning, Hank drove Olivia back to town in the wagon, Xav having been called to another section of the ranch to assess damage from the storm. The goodbye between them had been tender, with promises of seeing each other soon. As they approached Silverwater Creek, Olivia found herself imagining a future she had never dared dream of, a life with Xav at the Triple R, building something meaningful together. It was a far cry from the refined Boston existence she had once expected, but it filled her with a sense of rightness she couldn't deny. Martha was waiting on the boarding house porch, her expression a mixture of relief and exasperation. "I was about to send out a search party," she declared as Olivia descended from the wagon. "When the storm hit and you didn't return, I feared the worst." "I'm fine, Aunt Martha," Olivia assured her. "Mr. Peterson took good care of me at the ranch while Xav dealt with an emergency." Martha's sharp eyes missed nothing, neither the glow in Olivia's cheeks nor the way she said Xav's name. "I see," she said simply. "Well, come inside and tell me all about it." Over the next few weeks, Olivia and Xav's courtship deepened. He made the journey to town whenever he could spare time from the ranch, and occasionally she would visit the Triple R, always with Martha or another chaperone in tow for propriety's sake. September brought cooler temperatures and preparations for the fall cattle drive. Xav worked longer hours, and Olivia saw less of him, though his letters arrived regularly, carried by ranch hands making the trip to town for supplies. "He writes beautifully for a cowboy," Martha observed one evening as Olivia read her latest letter by lamplight. "He's more than just a cowboy," Olivia replied, tracing her fingers over the firm, bold handwriting. "He reads Shakespeare and Wordsworth when he's on night watch. He can name every star in the sky." Martha smiled knowingly. "You're completely smitten, aren't you?" "Yes," Olivia admitted without hesitation. "I am." "And your health?" Martha asked, her concern evident. "Dr. Peterson says you're much improved, but the consumption hasn't entirely left you. Ranch life is demanding, especially for a woman." Olivia set the letter aside. "I'm stronger every day. And I would rather have a shorter life filled with love and purpose than a long one wrapped in cotton wool." Martha nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Your mother was the same way, determined, passionate. She would have approved of Xav, I think, despite his lack of pedigree." "Really?" Olivia was surprised. Her mother had been the epitome of Boston society before her early death. "Caroline always had a better eye for character than your father," Martha said. "She would have seen what I see, a man of integrity who loves you completely." The words warmed Olivia, reinforcing her own feelings about Xav. 2 days later, a letter arrived that threatened to shatter her newfound happiness. It was from Boston, addressed in a hand she recognized all too well: Richard Blackwood, her former fiancé. With trembling fingers, Olivia broke the seal and read, "My dearest Olivia, I pray this letter finds you in good health. It has been brought to my attention that I may have acted hastily in breaking our engagement. Recent developments have made me reconsider my position. Your father's estate has been settled, and it appears there were assets previously unknown to the executors. As your closest male relation, I have been managing these affairs on your behalf. There is a modest sum that rightfully belongs to you, not a fortune, but enough to restore some comfort to your life. In light of this, and upon reflection of our many happy times together, I wish to renew my offer of marriage. Boston society has missed your gentle presence, and I find my life incomplete without you by my side. I can arrange for your return journey as soon as you respond with your acceptance. We could be married by Christmas, in the church we always planned on." With deepest affection, Richard. Olivia sat frozen, the letter clutched in her hand. Richard wanted her back not because he loved her, but because she was no longer completely destitute. The thought filled her with a cold anger she had never experienced during their courtship or even when he had abandoned her. "Bad news?" Martha asked, noting her expression. Wordlessly, Olivia handed over the letter. Martha's face darkened as she read. "The nerve of that man," she muttered. "Throwing you aside when you needed him most, then expecting you to come running back at his whistle." "There was a time when I would have," Olivia admitted, "when his approval meant everything to me." "And now?" Martha asked, though her knowing smile suggested she already knew the answer. Olivia's thoughts turned to Xav, his honesty, his quiet strength, the way he had cared for her at her weakest without expectation of return. "Now I know what real love looks like," she said softly, "and it's nothing like what Richard and I had." She took the letter back and moved to the fireplace where she fed it to the flames, watching as Richard's elegant script blackened and curled into ash. "Good girl," Martha approved. "Now, what will you tell Xav about this?" Olivia looked up, surprised. "Why would I tell him anything?" "It's over and done with." Martha shook her head. "Secrets have a way of coming out, especially in small towns. Better he hears it from you than through gossip." Olivia considered this advice. "You're right, of course. I'll tell him when he returns from the cattle drive." The cattle drive kept Xav away for nearly 3 weeks. When he finally returned to Silverwater Creek, he came straight to the boarding house, dusty from the trail and weary to the bone, but with a light in his eyes that kindled the moment he saw Olivia. "I missed you," he said simply, taking her hands in his as they sat on the porch swing. "And I you," she replied, drinking in the sight of him. Despite the exhaustion etched on his face, he had never looked more handsome to her. They talked of his journey, of the successful sale of the cattle in Tucson, of the small happenings in town during his absence. Finally, gathering her courage, Olivia told him about Richard's letter. Xav listened in silence, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he asked quietly, "Did you consider it?" His proposal, "Not for a moment," Olivia said firmly. "What we had wasn't real, I see that now." Relief washed over his features. "I was half afraid you'd be gone when I returned," he admitted. "Back to civilization, to a life better suited to a lady of your upbringing." Olivia squeezed his hands. "This is where I belong now, with you." The conviction in her voice seemed to give him courage. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object. "I've been carrying this since Tucson," he said, opening his palm to reveal a simple gold ring set with a single pearl. "It's not fancy, but it's beautiful," Olivia breathed, her heart racing. Xav slid from the swing to one knee before her, the gesture so unexpected and touching that tears sprang to her eyes. "Olivia Everly, I love you more than I ever thought possible. You came into my life when I least expected it, weak from illness but stronger in spirit than anyone I've ever known. Will you marry me? Will you build a life with me at the Triple R?" "Yes," Olivia whispered, then louder, "Yes, Xav, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly as if it had been made for her. Then he rose to sit beside her again, drawing her into a kiss that held all the promise of their future together. When they broke apart, both breathless and smiling, Xav said, "There's something else. I received a letter from Mr. Rutherford while in Tucson. He's decided to sell the Triple R." Olivia's heart sank. "What does that mean for you, for us?" "He's offering it to me first," Xav said, a note of wonder in his voice. "Said he's been planning this for years, grooming me to take over. He's asking a fair price with terms I can manage over time." "Xav, that's wonderful." Olivia exclaimed, "Your own ranch, just as you've always worked for." "Our ranch," he corrected. "If you want it, it won't be an easy life, Olivia. There will be hard times, long days, and lonely nights when I'm away on the range." Olivia touched his face gently. "I know what I'm choosing, Xav. A life with meaning, with purpose, with love. That's worth any hardship." He caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. "I promise to love you in weakness and in strength, in good times and bad, for all the days of my life." The words, so like a wedding vow yet spoken from the heart without ceremony, moved Olivia deeply. "And I promise the same," she whispered. They were married on a crisp October day in the small church in Silverwater Creek. The entire town turned out for the occasion, along with the ranch hands from the Triple R, all scrubbed and uncomfortable in their Sunday best. Olivia wore a simple white dress that Martha had helped her make, with lace from her mother's wedding gown adorning the collar and cuffs. As she walked down the aisle on Dr. Peterson's arm, the closest thing to a father figure in town, her eyes were fixed on Xav, standing tall and proud at the altar. His face when he saw her was a picture she would carry in her heart forever, a mixture of awe, love, and almost disbelief that this moment was real. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, and Xav lifted her veil to kiss her, a cheer went up from the assembled guests that nearly raised the rafters. The celebration afterward was held at the town hall, with food contributed by every family in Silverwater Creek and music provided by local talent. Olivia danced until her feet ached, not just with Xav but with Hank, with Dr. Peterson, with the ranch hands who now looked at her with a mixture of respect and protective affection. As the evening drew to a close, Xav led her outside to where a wagon waited, decorated with ribbons and flowers. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Galloway?" he asked, his voice husky with emotion. "Yes," Olivia replied simply, the word encompassing all her hopes and dreams for their future together. The Triple R was truly home now, their home. Mr. Rutherford had signed over the deed the week before, accepting Xav's first payment and declaring himself satisfied with the arrangement. The main house, which had seemed so masculine and somewhat impersonal during Olivia's first visit, was gradually taking on a softer touch under her care. That first night as husband and wife, as they lay tangled in each other's arms in what was now their bed, Xav traced the curve of her cheek with gentle fingers. "Are you happy?" he asked, a hint of vulnerability in his voice. Olivia smiled in the darkness. "Completely," she assured him. "Are you?" "More than I ever imagined possible," he replied, pulling her closer. "I keep thinking I'll wake up and find this was all a dream, that I never found you at the stagecoach that day." "Not a dream," she murmured, pressing a kiss to his chest, right over his heart. "Our life together is just beginning." The following spring brought new life to the Triple R. The winter had been mild, allowing the cattle to thrive, and the business prospects looked promising. Olivia had taken over the ranch accounts, discovering a talent for figures that impressed even Xav. But the most precious new life was the one growing inside her. When Olivia discovered she was with child, her joy was tempered with anxiety. Her health, though much improved, was still not robust. Dr. Peterson had warned that pregnancy might be risky. When she told Xav, his initial delight quickly gave way to concern. "Are you sure you're strong enough?" he asked, his hand covering hers where it rested on her still flat stomach. "No," she admitted honestly, "but I want this, Xav, our child, a family." His eyes, when they met hers, were filled with a love so profound it took her breath away. "Then we'll face whatever comes together. I'll be with you every step of the way." True to his word, Xav adjusted his responsibilities at the ranch to spend more time at the house as Olivia's pregnancy progressed. He hired an additional hand to take over some of his duties, and Hank took to bringing meals to the main house when Olivia was too tired to cook. Martha visited frequently from town, fussing over her niece and making sure she rested properly. Even Dr. Peterson made the journey to the Triple R for regular checkups, rather than having Olivia make the trip to town. As summer approached and Olivia's condition became more visible, Xav's protectiveness increased. He insisted on her resting during the hottest part of the day and limited her activities around the ranch. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," she protested one afternoon as he took a broom from her hands. "Humor me," he replied, dropping a kiss on her forehead. "I can't bear the thought of anything happening to you or the baby." Olivia softened, understanding his fear. "We're fine, Xav." "Better than fine." She guided his hand to her rounded belly where their child kicked vigorously. "Feel that, strong like his father, or stubborn like his mother," Xav countered with a smile. July brought scorching heat and an unexpected letter from Boston. This time, it was from Richard's sister, Elizabeth, who had been Olivia's friend before the scandal. "Dear Olivia, I hope this letter finds you well. It has been too long since we corresponded, and for that, I take full blame. I should have written after Richard's deplorable behavior, but family loyalty kept me silent. I write now because Richard has married a New York heiress with more money than sense, and I find myself free to renew our friendship if you are willing. I was surprised to learn from Martha's last letter that you have married as well, and to a rancher no less. I confess I cannot imagine you, with your love of music and literature, in such a rustic setting, but Martha assures me you are happier than she has ever seen you. If it would not be an imposition, I would dearly love to visit. The heat in Boston this summer is unbearable, and my doctor has recommended a change of air for my nerves. Your once and hopefully future friend, Elizabeth Blackwood. Olivia showed the letter to Xav that evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of gold and purple. "What do you think?" she asked after he had read it. "She was my dearest friend once." Xav considered his words carefully. "Do you want to see her?" "I think I do," Olivia admitted. "Elizabeth was different from the others. She visited me when I was ill, even after Richard broke our engagement. She stopped coming only when her family forbade it." "Then write to her," Xav said simply. "Invite her to stay. It might do you good to have a friend here, especially with the baby coming." Olivia leaned against his shoulder, grateful for his understanding. "What if she looks down on our life here on the ranch on Silverwater Creek?" Xav chuckled. "Then she'll return to Boston with some very entertaining stories to tell at her tea parties." He turned to face her. "Olivia, I'm not ashamed of what we've built here. If your friend can't see the value in it, that's her loss." Olivia wrote to Elizabeth the next day, extending an invitation to visit in September, after the worst of the summer heat had passed and before the baby was due in October. Elizabeth arrived on the stage in early September, looking every inch the Boston society lady in her tailored traveling suit and fashionable hat. But the warmth of her embrace when she saw Olivia was genuine, as were the tears in her eyes. "Look at you," she exclaimed, holding Olivia at arm's length. "Positively blooming, marriage and impending motherhood clearly agree with you." Xav, standing a respectful distance away, stepped forward as Olivia beckoned him. "Elizabeth, this is my husband, Xavier Galloway." "Xav, my friend Elizabeth Blackwood." Elizabeth extended her hand, which Xav took with a courteous nod. "Mrs. Galloway has told me much about you, Miss Blackwood. Welcome to the Triple R. Thank you for having me, Mr. Galloway," Elizabeth replied, and if she was taken aback by his frontier appearance, she hid it well. "I've been curious to see the life that has made Olivia so happy." The first few days of Elizabeth's visit were a period of adjustment for everyone. She was clearly out of her element on the ranch, startling at the sounds of cattle and unaccustomed to the simpler amenities of frontier life. Yet she made a genuine effort to adapt, watching Olivia's routines with interest and asking thoughtful questions about ranch operations. For her part, Olivia found herself seeing the Triple R through fresh eyes, appreciating anew the beauty of the landscape, the rhythm of ranch life, and the community they had built with the hands and their families. One evening, as the three of them sat on the porch after dinner, Elizabeth said, "I owe you an apology, Olivia." "Whatever for?" Olivia asked, surprised. "For not standing by you when you needed friends most," Elizabeth replied. "For allowing my family's pressure to keep me from visiting you after you fell ill, for not writing sooner." Olivia reached over to squeeze her friend's hand. "That's long past, Elizabeth. We've both found our way forward." Elizabeth glanced at Xav, who was whittling a small wooden horse, presumably for the baby. "Yes, you certainly have," she said softly. "I admit when I received your letter saying you'd married a rancher I had concerns. I imagined some rough, uncouth man who had somehow taken advantage of your vulnerable situation." Xav's hands stilled on his carving, though his expression remained neutral. "Instead," Elizabeth continued, "I find you married to a gentleman in the truest sense of the word, living a life that, while different from anything I know, clearly brings you joy." She smiled ruefully. "Boston society has lost its shine for me lately. Perhaps I needed to see that there are other ways to live a fulfilling life." "There are," Olivia agreed, exchanging a warm glance with Xav. "Though I won't pretend it's always easy, there are hardships here that I never faced in Boston." "Yet you face them with more strength than I ever saw in you there," Elizabeth observed. "It's as if you've become the person you were always meant to be." The conversation stayed with Olivia long after they had retired for the night. As she lay beside Xav in their bed, his hand resting protectively over her swollen belly, she reflected on Elizabeth's words. "She's right, you know," she said softly. "I am stronger here despite my illness, or perhaps because of it." Xav propped himself up on one elbow to look at her in the moonlight streaming through the window. "How do you mean? In Boston, I was sheltered from any real challenge. When adversity finally came, father's ruin, Richard's abandonment, my illness, I had no resources to draw upon." She covered his hand with hers. "Here, facing difficulties is part of daily life. We expect them, prepare for them, overcome them together." Xav nodded. "That's the West for you. It breaks some people, but it forges others into something stronger." "It forged us," Olivia said, reaching up to touch his face, "into a family." The baby chose that moment to deliver a particularly vigorous kick, making them both laugh. "Someone agrees with you," Xav said, bending to press a kiss to her belly. Elizabeth remained at the Triple R for 3 weeks, gradually shedding her city ways and embracing the rhythm of ranch life. She rode with Xav to check the herds, helped Olivia prepare meals for the hands, and even learned to gather eggs from the chicken coop without showing fear of the aggressive rooster. When the time came for her departure, she hugged Olivia tightly. "Write to me when the baby comes," she insisted. "And don't be surprised if I return for another visit. The air here has done wonders for my nerves." "You're welcome anytime," Olivia assured her, genuinely sad to see her friend go. As Xav drove Elizabeth to town to catch the stage, Olivia felt a strange restlessness. She wandered through the house, touching the furniture she had carefully selected, the curtains she had sewn, the books that lined the shelves Xav had built for her. A sharp pain in her lower back made her gasp. She steadied herself against the wall, waiting for it to pass. Dr. Peterson had warned her that the last weeks of pregnancy might bring practice contractions, but this felt different. When a second pain came just minutes later, Olivia knew. The baby was coming, nearly 3 weeks earlier than expected. Fear gripped her. Xav was on his way to town with Elizabeth. Martha was in Silverwater Creek. The ranch hands were scattered across the property with their daily tasks, and Dr. Peterson was a good hour's ride away. Taking a deep breath, Olivia made her way to the porch and rang the dinner bell, the signal for emergency on the ranch. Within minutes, Hank appeared from the bunkhouse, followed by 2 of the younger hands who had been working nearby. "The baby," Olivia explained through gritted teeth as another contraction seized her. "It's coming. Xav is in town." Hank's weathered face showed no panic, only calm determination. "Tomás," he ordered one of the hands, "ride for the doctor, fast as you can. Miguel, find the boss in town. Tell him to hurry but not to break his neck getting here." To Olivia, he said gently, "Let's get you comfortable, Mrs. Galloway. This ain't my first rodeo with birthing, though usually it's calves, not babies." Despite her fear and pain, Olivia managed a weak smile. Hank's matter-of-fact approach was oddly reassuring. He helped her to the bedroom and sent one of the ranch wives who lived nearby to assist her. The next hours were a blur of pain and waiting. The contractions came faster and more intensely, and Olivia found herself calling for Xav, needing his strength. As if summoned by her thoughts, he burst into the bedroom, his face pale with worry. "I'm here," he said, taking her hand. "I'm right here, Olivia." His presence gave her renewed courage. When Dr. Peterson arrived an hour later, the labor was well advanced. "This baby's in a hurry to meet the world," the doctor observed as he examined her. "Everything looks good, Mrs. Galloway. You're doing fine." The final stage of labor tested Olivia's strength to its limits. As she struggled to bring their child into the world, she drew on reserves she hadn't known she possessed, bolstered by Xav's unwavering support. "You can do this," he murmured, wiping her brow with a cool cloth. "You're the strongest person I know." With a final, tremendous effort, Olivia felt the baby slip from her body, and then the most beautiful sound she had ever heard filled the room, the lusty cry of their newborn child. "A girl, Doctor," Peterson announced, placing the squalling infant on Olivia's chest. "A healthy baby girl." Olivia gazed down at their daughter in wonder. Tiny fists waved in the air and a shock of dark hair like Xav's covered her head. "She's perfect," Xav whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Just like her mother." Exhausted but elated, Olivia looked up at her husband. "We did it," she said softly. "You did it," he corrected, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I just held your hand." They named her Caroline Martha Galloway after Olivia's mother and aunt. Caroline quickly became the center of their world, bringing joy not just to her parents, but to the entire ranch. Hank appointed himself honorary grandfather, carving toys and telling the infant stories as if she could understand every word. The winter that followed Caroline's birth was one of the coldest on record for the Arizona Territory. Snow blanketed the Triple R, turning the landscape into a white wonderland that reminded Olivia of New England winters. Despite the harsh weather, the ranch prospered. Xav's careful management and Olivia's skilled bookkeeping ensured they met their payment to Mr. Rutherford on time, with a little extra besides. The herd was healthy, the hands loyal, and their home warm with love. On Christmas Eve, as they sat before the fire with Caroline sleeping in her cradle nearby, Xav presented Olivia with a small, wrapped package. "What's this?" she asked, surprised. They had agreed to keep gifts simple that year, focusing instead on Caroline's first Christmas. "Open it," he urged. Inside, she found a leather-bound journal, its pages blank and waiting. The inside cover bore an inscription in Xav's bold handwriting, "For Olivia, who found strength in weakness and taught me to do the same. All my love always. Xav." Tears filled her eyes as she traced the words with her fingertip. "It's perfect," she whispered. "But what is it for?" "Your stories," he replied. "I've seen you watching everything, taking it all in. I thought maybe you'd want to write about our life here, about Caroline as she grows, about the West as it changes." Touched by his thoughtfulness, by how well he understood her, Olivia leaned over to kiss him. "Thank you, I'll treasure it always." As the fire crackled and their daughter slept peacefully, Olivia reflected on the journey that had brought her here from a sickly, disgraced Boston socialite to a rancher's wife, a mother, a woman who had found her true strength in the most unexpected place. "What are you thinking?" Xav asked, noting her contemplative expression. "About the day we met," she replied. "How weak I was, how ashamed of my circumstances." He took her hand, his thumb tracing the calluses she had developed from ranch work. "You were never weak, Olivia. Ill, yes, but never weak in spirit. You saw something in me that day that I couldn't see in myself," she said. "Potential, perhaps, or resilience." "I saw you," he said simply. "Just you. And I knew somehow that you were what I had been waiting for all my life." Caroline stirred in her cradle, making the small, whimpering sounds that preceded waking. Olivia moved to attend to her, lifting the baby into her arms and returning to Xav's side. As their daughter's eyes, blue like her father's, blinked open, Olivia felt a sense of completion, of rightness. The journey from weakness to strength had not been easy, but every step had led her here, to this moment, to this family they had created together. "I love you," she said to Xav, the words simple but encompassing a world of meaning. "In weakness and in strength, in all the days to come." "And I love you," he replied, his arm encircling her and their daughter. "Always." Outside, snow continued to fall softly on the Triple R, blanketing the land in pristine white. Inside, by the warmth of the fire, the Galloway family embraced their future together. In the years that followed, the Triple R flourished under Xav and Olivia's stewardship. They paid off the ranch in full 5 years ahead of schedule, prompting a visit from Mr. Rutherford himself, who declared it the best investment he'd ever made. Olivia's health continued to improve, though she would always bear the marks of her illness. On cold mornings, her lungs reminded her of her former weakness, but she had learned to pace herself, to accept help when needed, and to find strength in vulnerability. Caroline grew into a spirited child with her father's adventurous nature and her mother's love of books. She was joined when she was 4 by a brother, Thomas Xavier Galloway, named for Xav's father and himself. Tom, as they called him, was quieter than his sister but equally determined, with an affinity for horses that manifested almost as soon as he could walk. Silverwater Creek grew as well, transitioning from a frontier outpost to a proper town with a school, a larger church, and eventually even a small library that Olivia helped establish. Martha continued to run the boarding house well into her 70s, finally retiring to a small cottage on the Triple R property where she could be close to her family. Elizabeth Blackwood became a regular visitor, spending at least a month each year at the ranch. She never married, preferring her independence and her work with various charitable organizations in Boston. "Some of us aren't meant for marriage," she told Olivia during one visit, "but that doesn't mean we can't have rich, full lives." On a warm spring day in 1893, 15 years after Olivia had first arrived in Silverwater Creek, she sat on the porch of the ranch house, writing in one of the many journals Xav had given her over the years. This one was nearly full, its pages chronicling the growth of their children, the development of the ranch, and the changing face of the West they loved. Xav joined her, his hair now touched with silver at the temples but his blue eyes as vibrant as ever. "What are you writing today?" he asked, settling into the chair beside hers. "Our story," she replied with a smile. "From the beginning," he raised an eyebrow. "From when I found you half-conscious at the stagecoach?" "Yes," she said, reaching over to take his hand. "From when you said you'd love me in weakness and strength." "Best promise I ever made," he said, bringing her hand to his lips. "And the easiest to keep." From the corral came the sound of children's laughter. Caroline, now 14 and as graceful on horseback as any ranch hand, was teaching 10-year-old Tom a new trick. Their voices carried on the clear air, a reminder of all that had grown from what once seemed like endings: Olivia's illness, her father's disgrace, Xav's solitary existence. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't met that day?" Olivia asked. "If someone else had helped me, or if I had arrived when you were out on the range," Xav considered the question. "I believe we would have found each other somehow," he said finally. "Some things are meant to be, no matter the obstacles." Olivia nodded, thinking of all they had overcome together: drought years that threatened the ranch, her health scares after Tom's birth, the changing cattle market, the gradual taming of the frontier they had both come to love. "I'm glad it was you, though," she said softly. "I'm glad it was your arms that caught me when I fell, your voice that promised to love me through it all. And I'm glad it was you who taught me that there's strength in vulnerability," Xav replied. "That loving someone doesn't make you weaker, it makes you stronger than you ever thought possible." As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Olivia looked out over the land that had become home. The Triple R spread before them, cattle grazing peacefully in the distance, the bunkhouse where loyal hands would soon gather for supper, the small cemetery on the hill where Martha now rested. This was the life she had never imagined, but could no longer imagine living without a life built on love that had seen them through weakness and strength, through joy and sorrow, through all the challenges the frontier had thrown their way. "I love you, Xav Galloway," she said, the words as true now as they had been when first spoken. "And I love you, Olivia Galloway," he replied, his hand warm and steady in hers. "Always have, always will." In the distance, their children's laughter rang out again, a promise of the future and a testament to the past, to a love that had begun when a cowboy had seen beyond weakness to the strength that lay beneath, and a woman had found the courage to embrace a life she never knew she wanted. Together, they watched the sunset, two people who had found each other against all odds and built a life as vast and beautiful as the western sky above them.